The media circus around Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s free agency has already begun. It's in full swing already, and we aren't even to opening day yet. The Atlanta Braves make another key addition to their roster, bringing in Alex Verdugo and more up and down performances across Major League Baseball spring training. Let's get to opening day already, can we? Without further ado, let's begin MLB Hot Stove Daily. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us this evening on a Thursday night. Hopefully you guys had some fun watching some spring training baseball, watching a little hockey day, maybe a little hoops. NCAA tournament is going, and lots of headlines around the entire sports world. But we're getting ever so closer to the actual start of the season, and opening day is about a week away. There's lots of headlines to get to, so without further ado, let's get into them. We begin with the Toronto Blue Jays. Mark Shapiro took them to the media today. An article was posted in The Athletic, a couple of other places as well, that basically say to the same effect that, hey, yes, we're the Blue Jays. There's only been one player ever to really change the landscape as far as drawing ticket sales, those kinds of things. That being the, in parentheses, nobody really saying it out loud anyway, is Shohei Ohtani. Other than that, he views all other players as being key cogs, absolutely, but not necessarily difference makers when it comes to ticket revenue. That's what he says in one breath. And then in the next breath, he says, yes, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is part of the winning teams that help draw those fans that ultimately come in. They'll come in for a winning team. They won't necessarily go to a team that's losing with a good player on that roster. So I do agree in general with what Shapiro's content or the message actually was, but it's just a very poorly timed statement by him. Just a very poorly worded phrasing. If you're trying to convince Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to try to stay there, trying to instill some confidence in your fan base that you'll be able to get the extension done, where's the heaping of praise on Vladdy Guerrero? Instead, it was more of, hey, we got to be more tempered in our approach here. We're not necessarily going to do it for the wrong reasons. We're going to do it for the right reasons for the Toronto Blue Jays. And all that is, well and good and everything. But, we kind of knew that going in here. This was an opportunity for Shapiro and company to really go out there and say, hey, man, Vladdy, we know we haven't done right by you yet. We've kind of got this organization up a creek without a paddle, and we're needing you to kind of carry us across the finish line this year. But with that being said, we are all in on the future around Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Instead of saying something like that, he came out with, well, we got to do the cautious approach, make sure we're doing everything the right way, make sure that we're not overvaluing our own player. We got to take into account our future finances. And like I said, all those answers might be factually correct and might be what he should be doing, but that's not the message you send in the media. The message you send in the media is this: hey, Vlad, you're a key part of our team. You're our best player on this team. We absolutely understand the value you present to this fan base. The fan base is with you. You're Canadian through and through, basically born and raised here. We want to keep you here in Toronto. We just got to do it at something that makes sense for the ball club. Instead of getting into the itemized line by line of why you can't sign him for X, Y, and Z, just make that statement. We have to do it for a way that makes sense to the ball club. That's all he had to say. And the media circus, we told you guys about 3-4 weeks ago when spring training was just beginning that the media circus was just literally starting that day. It's in full swing right now. Vlad Guerrero Jr. himself says he's not willing to talk about an extension during the season. We'll see if that ultimately holds up or if they're able to convince him to sign a deal. But Shapiro, in that comment, in that interview that I mentioned anyway, he says he does expect to get an extension done with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Love the confidence, but at this point, if you think that you were that close, that you can say that confidently, that you're going to get a deal done, I just wonder why the deal isn't done already if it's as close as you're saying it is. Or as at least a more legitimate possibility or more legitimate certainty than what has been perceived on the outside looking in. So for me, this is just the beginning of the iceberg here, the tip of the iceberg. We're going to see a lot more stories come out day over day for the Blue Jays. But for me, it was just a poorly timed interview for one. I know that they were going to talk about it as we get to opening day. I get it. It's a news story. But the comment you say is either A, no comment, submit a request for an interview with our lawyer or with our public relations team or whoever, or just say something to the effect of, Vlad, he's a great player. We love having him on the Blue Jays. You don't even have to comment about the actual contract itself. All right. Welcome in, Holly. Welcome in, Steven. You think Vlad will resign? Too devastating to the Blue Jays if they don't resign him? I'm kind of the same thought. I'd say they're probably the favorite out of all the other teams that are out there, but I don't necessarily think it's an overwhelming favorite. For me, last year with Juan Soto, I thought it was pretty evenly split between 4 or 5 teams that had a legitimate shot to sign him. I don't feel that way with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think there's probably 2, maybe 3 teams that are really good chances, and then a bunch of teams in that 2, 3, 4% category. But for me, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is probably more likely than not to end up with the Blue Jays versus a team like the Giants, for instance. Giants, I think, will be in that market. Mets will be in that market. Yankees will probably be in the market. There's going to be no shortage of suitors, but we'll have to see what that price ultimately comes down to. If you're willing to spend $700 million on Juan Soto, at a certain point, you got to try to lock up your own guys. And I like the addition that they made in Santander, but in the video that we mentioned earlier today, if you guys want to check out that short 30-second video we posted earlier this morning, we kind of detailed how Max Scherzer is now injured in that starting rotation. There's going to be some turnover there as far as injury risk and older players and contracts expiring each of the next couple of years here. This could look like a very different team in a rebuild or at least a retool situation at bare minimum. So when you look at the Blue Jays, for me, this is an organization that is at a crossroads, needs to make a decision as to their primary free agent as to what they're going to do, and stick to a lane and choose it and stay on it. The last thing you want to do is be hemming and hawing around the periphery here. One other bit of news I wanted to get into today was the Atlanta Braves signing Alex Verdugo to a 1-year deal with $1.5 million value. The great thing about that deal is that they included another option year for them. So they were able to send him down to the minor league camp right now so that he can have a proper extended spring training and he's ready to go at the beginning or close to it at the start of the year. Whether that's a couple weeks into the year, 3 weeks, who knows. But either way, I love the signing for them. With Acuna being down for at least a couple of months here, I do love the signing of Profar. Kelenic is out there, of course, but I would love to have seen them add another bat here, and that's exactly what they did. I think there's several teams out there that should have done this deal. Looking at you, Houston, looking at you, Pittsburgh, but ultimately it's the Braves that get the deal done. Good on them. And once again, they add another minor league piece to give them additional depth as we gear up for the 2025 season. Alrighty. There's a couple things I wanted to mention before we get to our main topic here. There's a couple of worrisome performances, if you will, from some teams that we just discussed in our Power Rankings episode last night. For instance, the Texas Rangers. I thought they had really nice depth, really high-end young player depth anyway, to come in and take over the reins here. Those performances have gotten a little bit shaky towards the end of spring training. A couple of the other arms that were going to be held primarily at AAA also have looked a little bit shaky over the last couple of weeks here. Now, the one part that hasn't looked shaky so far is their primary bullpen. We're talking guys that are going to be coming in winning situations, 7th, 8th, and 9th inning guys. Those guys have looked really good as of late. That part of the bullpen might be solved. Got to keep your fingers crossed, of course. But for me, starting pitching is now the biggest issue I have with this ball club. The addition of Patrick Corbin, 1 year, $1 million. Love the signing, gives them some depth. But where's the performance here? I know Jacob deGrom is going to be very good. If he's healthy and pitching, I expect a sub-3 ERA, maybe even sub 2.5. He is that solid, that incredible. He is all of that. I mean, he has every bit the accolades that everybody bestows upon him, and then some. Absolutely, injuries have kind of derailed his career, but deGrom is every bit worth the price of admission when you get to go see him. Now, as far as the rest of that rotation, a lot of question marks for me. And with now the struggling performances in spring training from guys like Kumar Rocker, Jack Leiter, and Hauser, even Murphy finally gave up a run here. This is a 4-5 or 3-4-5 that gives me a lot of hesitation here for the Texas Rangers. With no Bradford to fall back on, no Gray to fall back on, I wonder if they ultimately choose to bring in another target via trade earlier in the year than they probably otherwise would have. It's going to be a tough situation for them to kind of manage here as they try to manage their injuries. Got to hope for a nice bounce-back season for Molly as well. But the Rangers, when we do our power rankings here, you might see a little bit of a change as far as where I have them ranked. So we'll have to see how we go through the year. But right now, a lot of injury risks are taking their toll on a lot of these teams out there. And not just the injuries as well. It's the struggling performances in spring training against hitters you're not going to see every day. At the major league level. Now, sure, maybe it's just getting better competition. Maybe it's just trying to work on something in your craft. But at a certain point, you'd like to, if you're trying to earn a roster spot, you're trying to throw every bit that you can, every single pitch you throw, trying to perform and get the result that you want every single time. Is that how it works? Not really. I will say that Kumar had a pretty good start anyway, as far as how it began. Basically 8 strikeouts today, 4 2/3. But he did give up some runs. Bullpen kind of failed him at the very end of his outing there. But for me, the Rangers, among several other teams, need to get some of their 6th, 7th pitchers who are going to be stepping up into their rotation due to injury. They need to get some really nice performances out of them for probably about a month. And hopefully the big guys are back sooner rather than later. Larry, welcome in. Do you think the Yankees will get a third baseman next week when other players are available and another starting pitcher? Larry, welcome in. I do appreciate you joining us once again. Got about 9-10 likes already on the video. If you guys wouldn't mind doing that and hitting that thumbs up on the video, it goes a long way to helping us. But to answer your question there, the Yankees are actually looking for another third baseman. I think they're looking very bargain basement here. Nothing that's going to surprise any of you guys out there. But I do think there's a legitimate chance that they do add another third base, second base, shortstop option, somebody with some defensive versatility that they can plug and play wherever they need him to play. As far as another starting pitcher, they are pushing hard for an ace at the top of that rotation. They're trying to avoid going to kind of the Patrick Corbin class that the Rangers did to kind of fill their rotation issues. They're going a little bit more big game hunting there. Holly, you think Kumar starts in AAA? I think that was the plan to begin the year. I wonder if that's still the plan now. At some point here, he probably gets called, or I think he's going to be on the Major League roster or close to it at the start of the year. And then we see him kind of fall back into the shadows a little bit as the year goes along. But we shall see. Kumar Rocker, I think his best pitching will probably come in June, July, and August when the Rangers are going to need their depth. But as far as a lot of... I would just like to see that these pieces get back and be healthy more than anything else. Holly the Pen, also known as Dunning. Dunning has had a kind of an up and down spring training as well. There was some thought that he could actually start in AAA based on how this spring has gone. But they need the starting pitching right now, and he's one guy who's experienced the major league level that you'd hope would be able to at least take a spot start or two if the need arose. All right, last thing I wanted to get into was the contract situation around Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Why exactly didn't they get the deal done? What exactly is the holdup? Why didn't they get it done 2 years ago? Why didn't they get it done this past offseason? Why are we still talking about it to the point where he's going to go to free agency and then we'll talk about it all over again? For me, I would have started this negotiation 3 years ago. I would at least broach the subject and been like, "Hey, dude, we'd love having you on our team. What would it take to get you to sign long term? What are you kind of getting, or what are you looking for? Any ideas?" And sure, he might have given you the politically correct answer and said, "Nah, man, I'm focusing on baseball, blah blah blah." But at a certain point, you talk to the agent and get an idea of what it's going to cost to be able to get it done. Now, maybe they don't want to divulge numbers. If that's the case, then so be it. You float a number out there and see if they strike it down. If they do, or if they, kind of register that it's a very valuable offer that they'd be willing to consider, that's something that you might want to file away for when you continue the next steps of negotiation. This offseason, if you didn't get the extension done already, you get to this offseason and you're like, "Hey man, we got the winter meetings coming up. We'd like to get this thing done before spring training." Obviously, no trade has been made, no extension has been made, and so for Vladdy Guerrero Jr., it's going to be kind of the media circus all year long until Toronto decides to choose a direction. Do they sign him long term? Do they go ahead and take the risk and let him go in free agency if he does leave for nothing? Or do you try to maximize his value right now? A lot of interesting questions to be had around the Toronto Blue Jays. But as far as the negotiation, you get to the year or this past off season with the winter meetings. You talk to him and say, "Hey man, we really want to sign you. We got lots of big irons in the fire. Understandably, where finances will change drastically if we actually do land Juan Soto." So if they, in the event that they had, obviously that would have changed their numbers that they might have been thinking, or at least had available to them if they had gotten the deal done. Obviously, it didn't happen, and as far as the Blue Jays, this marks, three top-flight free agents that they've tried to lure in the last couple of years and fail on all of them. Santander is their one bright success story there, and even that's a quote-unquote lower-cost salary than what we were originally expecting him to sign. But the Blue Jays, to me, the one thing you can't do is what the Angels did with Shohei Ohtani. Realize that you're 7 games out of the wild card and realize it's time to sell or change up things entirely. But to me, I wonder if the Blue Jays just say never die and just try to add and add and add like the Angels did when they have no real chance to make it. But you can understand the temptation to try to get it done as well. Let's see here. Blue Jays won't even acknowledge that he was a superstar. True, I did see that in the article as well. They were very careful with how they worded his connection and his abilities on the field. You will certainly feel them in the postseason if they get that far this year. In the pennant chase, I think he'll be very good as well. Welcome in, Lucas. Appreciate you joining us. Just going to do a quick live tonight. Got a long day tomorrow at work, unfortunately. Still kind of solo at the moment. But I want to take some time and just discuss how that contract negotiation would really go with the Blue Jays. Blue Jays, to me, I don't think they're necessarily being cheap. I just think the prices have really gotten out of hand as far as free agency. And here's the thing. It ain't coming back down. So even though I think it's a little bit high right now in free agency, these free agent contracts are getting quite insurmountable. Locking up your own guys has got to be the first priority now. And for the Blue Jays not to have taken it a little bit more seriously, not this offseason, but last and the year before that, that to me is a little bit of short-sighted thinking anyway by an organization that absolutely needs to not lose the golden goose. You lose Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in free agency for a bag of beans and a compensation pick. Let's just say the fan base will not be very pleased in that scenario. But as far as the negotiations, as far as the dollar value, he's said to be looking for $500 million in present-day value. I think you could actually get there in free agency, and I wonder if the Blue Jays are the team that gives it to him, or if he just says, the heck with this, I love that all this interest from other teams, I want to try my luck at another spot because I like this position over where I'm coming from. So we'll see what ultimately happens. Sometimes I wonder how teams go on after telling their guys that they're not that good for months of negotiations. Well, I think your case study for that one is Corbin Burns with the Milwaukee Brewers. He went to the arbitration hearing and just kind of sat there and watched as his team basically berated him and talked about how terrible his stats were, talked about how he was the reason why they didn't make it into the postseason. Even though he was one cog of the team, absolutely, he is not the sole reason that they did not make it to October. And that set a really poor taste in his mouth. And obviously, as far as the Corbin Burns in Milwaukee, that ship had sailed and said, I ain't signing here, I'm leaving. So they did the right thing and went ahead and moved him to Baltimore. And he has since now signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So you got to be very upfront, got to be very direct and reasonable when it comes to these contract negotiations. Since they didn't get the extension done last offseason, they didn't get it done at the winter meetings. No such productivity has been made up until spring training. And to my knowledge, I'm sure that they've talked about baseball and those kinds of things, but we've heard nothing as far as contract negotiations for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. The only thing we've really heard is that interview that I mentioned earlier today. So as far as the Blue Jays are concerned, you have to get that signing done. If you don't, get the extension done, if you aren't able to convince him to get back to the table, you're in for a very difficult fight from a lot of teams that might have as deep or deeper pockets than you. And it's going to be very difficult to walk out of there with the Golden Goose coming back to Toronto. So we'll have to see how this ultimately plays out. But we'll be live again tomorrow night. We'll probably start a little earlier tomorrow. But again, one-man show this week. So I do appreciate your understanding and patience. I do want to get into a little bit more about the discussion that goes into a contract. So, if you guys have a free agent that's on your favorite team that's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, give us your best take as to why you would convince or how you'd convince that player to join your team once again. What's so special for Framber Valdez about playing in Houston? And we'll get to talk about a lot of those, guys that are pending free agents next off season and kind of prepare ourselves for the, upcoming off season as well. As we, are a few days away from opening day still, got a little bit more time where we can discuss some future ideas, some, off the field things. And that's one thing I want to kind of focus on is what's the next class of free agency really going to look like now that we've seen a lot of the one-year deals come to fruition. How do they ultimately build out, their rosters next offseason with the free agents that are available, holes that are on your team now? Will they still be a hole in a year from now? We'll have to see how these teams ultimately react as the year goes along. If they're struggling, if they are having a better than expected year, we'll have to see how these things work out for a lot of these clubs as far as how they decide to address holes. Do they address them now and try to add a guy in spring or at the end of spring training? Do they trade for it at the very beginning of the season? Do they wait and see how their team ultimately reacts to the offseason changes and shake it up at the All-Star break before the trade deadline? Or do they wait until the offseason to really solve the rest of their issues as well? Trent Duke is down 4 with 2:12 remaining. That's insane. I might have to check out that one before I hit the hay. All right, appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Tell us your favorite free agent that's going to be a UFA next year, free agent next year, and we'll get into all of that as well. But appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe, and we'll be back live again tomorrow night. For now, y'all stay safe out there, everybody.